Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. Well, Peter, as you well know, today is June the 22nd, and it's a day that has now become sacred in Russian history. It's one in which everybody remembers the day 80 years ago when Nazi Germany launched what really was up till then been something that is unique, namely a completely unprovoked attack, unprovoked and without any warning or anything. I mean, I mean, there've been aggressive wars before, but usually at least there've been some steps, to give a warning, that, ultimatums, whatever. This was nothing. This was anyway. To commemorate this day, Vladimir Putin has penned an article for German newspaper Die Zeit, and it's a short article. It's not as long as his famous essay last year about the diplomatic origins of World War II. But nonetheless, even though it's short, I mean, he said some interesting things in it, and the thrust of it was a partnership between the desirability, at least, of a partnership between Russia and Europe. And I'll quote a few sentences from it, which gives you a sense of what he's getting at. Is that having lived through the horrors of the World War, the peoples of Europe were nevertheless able to overcome alienation and restore mutual trust and respect. They set a course for integration in order to draw a final line under the European tragedies of the first half of the 20th century. And then he says, and I would like to emphasize that the historical reconciliation of our people with the Germans living both in the East and the West of modern United Germany played a huge role in the formation of such Europe. And then he goes on, I would also like to remind that it was the German entrepreneurs who became pioneers of cooperation with our country in the post-war years. In 1970, the USSR and the Federal Republic of Germany concluded a, quote, deal of the century, unquote, on long-term natural gas supplies to Europe that laid the foundation for constructive interdependence and initiated many future grand projects, including the construction of the Nord Stream gas pipeline. So he gives a nice historical background there. And then he goes on saying, well, at the end of the Cold War, we would have thought that there would be an even greater and more intense partnership between Russia and Europe. And in fact, the opposite happened. And his explanation for why the opposite happened was NATO's expansion. NATO, a Cold War relic, yet nonetheless given a new boost of life when it shouldn't have done. And more seriously, the civilizational choice that was imposed on countries that did not want to make a civilizational choice. And everyone has forgotten when I think Carl Bildt, one of these big EU worthies, told Ukraine in 2013, at the time when Viktor Yanukovych had withdrawn his signature from the EU association agreement, he said, Ukraine faces an existential choice. Is it with the East or is it with the West? And that was the kind of the ultimatum that led to the debacle of 2014. So what Putin is saying in this editorial is that there's an opportunity now for Europe and Russia to get together, realize not just the Gold's dream of, this is from the Atlantic to the Urals, but actually from Lisbon to Vladivostok, which means that it's a cultural, civilizational entity of Europe and Russia. Excluded from this is the United States. And that's quite notable that it is very much focused on Europe, as was de Gaulle's vision. And I think that's a very notable theme of this essay. All right, Peter, what was your take?
Well, it's interesting you say that because that actually is a choice. I mean, either we're all Europeans or within Europe from Lisbon to Vladivostok, or we're not, okay? And certainly the United States isn't part of that. So it's kind of, it's turning it upside down, okay? You know, if this is the time for choices, then it's really your choice, right? Okay, because I'm proposing it. It was quite remarkable essay, short one, but 80 years after the most horrific event in modern Russian history. Russia's had some pretty bad moments, okay? And to write such a considerate and well-balanced essay, I thought was very, very interesting. But most interesting of all, it almost to a point shocked me, George, is this, it was kind of like, last call, everyone. This is the last call.
Right.
Because, and he even talks about how the world is dynamic. Things are changing.
That's a good point.
And nation states and citizens, societies have to start, we have to make choices. And it is basically a message to the West and obviously to the United States in an indirect way. That indirectness is so direct, don't you think? But I've been saying long, and this is for people watching the gaggle here, this is a kind of a point that George and I actually separate, is that I say adios, we're out of here, okay? I mean, this is just too much. You're never satisfied. You never can say yes. And so it just, the world is moving on. What is it? The dogs bark, but the caravan passes through. And so I thought it was very interesting that he was saying, you know, this is a historic moment. Let's think about what happened 80 years ago, all of the progress we made, and then we've come in. The thing that really separates us is your insistence through your major patron to divide Europe, to hard divisions. And this is we should have overcome that in 1945, but it's only been continued.
Right. No, that's right.
The end of the Cold War, which again, people will not hear this in other places, the Soviet Union opted out. It wasn't defeated. It said, we're not going to participate anymore. Right. In such an amazing historical moment, considering what happened in the 20th century, considering the price that the citizens of the Soviet Union had to pay. I mean, again, if there was ever an article said, this is how the other side sees things. This is crystal clear. There are no big words. They're very simple.
They made that decision, and I think that many people in the Soviet Union are not happy that they made that decision, that it was a very reckless and frivolous decision that was made by the Soviet leaders, not just Gorbachev, but the Soviet leaders of that time. And then they should have looked at history and the historical experience of Russia rather than naively trusting the empty platitudes of Western leaders. And so that is you're right that they gave it up, and for whatever reason. But it was a major step, and Russia certainly suffered considerable amount as a result. But you're absolutely right in saying that, he's talking about the dynamic, which means he's saying, there's, for us, there's an alternative. We've got our friendship with China. Now, I don't think that Russia would like to be in a position whereby it has a foot in both camps. I don't think Russia would like to be,
of course,
just China's junior partner in terms of its economy. But it's a really interesting, because it goes back. Remember when Gorbachev in the late 80s talked about the common European home. The Americans really hated that, because they were afraid that what Gorbachev is doing is neutralizing the West. He's showing his olive branch to NATO, and then NATO say, "Hey, great, common European home, adios, America." And so it was a real nightmare, this common European home. And then, of course, we didn't hear any more about it. But it is interesting that Putin is bringing this up. And the business about the German entrepreneurs is very interesting. I mean, that was in 1970. In other words, don't give it this Nord Stream 2. This plan, natural gas for Germany, was signed in 1970. It's a long-standing plan that German entrepreneurs have been working on. So this ridiculous hysteria is.
Well, to tell everybody how much I remember it. I remember it very well. To remind our viewers how much the U.S. hated this natural gas relationship the Soviet Union had with Germany, is that under the Reagan administration, they blew up a significant pipeline through. Today it would be considered very primitive electronics, but it was built into this some of the components, and the gleefulness in the Reagan administration, because they were terrified. But if you look at history, And I'm glad that President Putin brought that up. The only time there was a disruption of gas is because of not a European country. It was Ukraine that did that. It was Ukraine that disrupted their delivery of Russian natural gas. It wasn't Russia's fault. But of course, in the mainstream media, these people, they know nothing about history. They don't even know that. And they're not even curious why it happened. Why did they build the Nord Stream 1 and 2, everybody? Germany wanted it because of Ukraine. And you know what? It serves them because, Germany was very much part of the regime change in Ukraine in the spring of 2014. And then, Angela, now you're really regretting your decision now, huh? Don't you remember what happened in the first gas war? Yep. I mean, my goodness. And then you you flip the regime. See, this is just the gross callousness of Western policy towards Russia. You rue the day that you make of decisions that you made. What are the possible consequences? They don't think in those terms here. But going back to the letter, the article, Putin is saying we're at a historical juncture again. And why should the Russian side repeat? We've been repeating until we're blue in the face. You don't hear us. You don't want to hear us. Right. But the world is dynamic. Right. And you and I have talked at great length, and I think it's such an important point to bring up, is that it's also a cultural, intellectual challenge here, because I can tell you, Russia's a very, very conservative place. They kind of like it that way. They believe in like families and traditional behaviors in public. And it's kind of nice that way. And there's a lot of people there, and it's even debated within the small liberal community here, is that, whoa, we don't want the full package. No, not the full package. And that's kind of embedded in the article as well.
No, I think that's right. And it's a very interesting point because when the whole Black Lives Matter movement and all the protests that took place in America last year, people know that Putin and the Russian government were not at all happy about these protests. What is much less known is that even Russian liberals didn't like it at all. They also were very uncomfortable with violence, with open disrespect toward the police, destruction of property, threatening people's lives. So this was not just simply the conservative Russian government; it was just the Russian liberal opinion was thinking that. And you can see that there is a kind of a cultural divide that is taking place, even in Europe. I mean, we've already spoken before about the attitude of Hungary and the attitude of Poland, although Poland is very, very hostile toward Russia. But that is it. I mean, there is a distinct movement within Europe that saying, we really don't want to go down where America is going. We just don't know. We don't know where this is.
Including the French. Remember Macron?
Yeah, exactly. They seem to be embracing some kind of a lunacy, and we don't really want to go down that path. And I think that's a very important part of it, the eventual appeal of Russia. And let's remember, there's going to be an election in Germany in September. At the moment, this new the CDU look like they've made a recovery. So this new guy, Armin Laschet, seems to be sounding sensible. Now, we don't know. German leaders have often sounded sensible and said, yeah, we need good relations with Russia. Russia's not our enemy. We must stop treating Russia as if it's our enemy. But, I mean, it's an interesting. I mean, if, Laschet, we know that Merkel has been pretty terrible. So a break from Merkelism, may well be an important shift in European politics and culture.
Yeah, but in a broader sense, logically dictate, I think, considering the divisions that we saw in Europe, and then there was that opportunity and to have, and look, I mean, the Germans and the French hated each other for a really long time, okay? And they had good reason to. But one of the lessons of the horrific wars of the 20th century was reconciliation and recognizing what was wrong, what was right, and have mutual respect. And that is the very foundation of the European Union to this day, is Franco-German reconciliation.
Right.
I remember doing programs on it, the pity that Poland and Russia couldn't go through the same process of saying, here's the good, bad, and the ugly of our history. And the most important thing is that we learn from it. We learn from it so we can move forward. But that hasn't happened, okay, unfortunately. Good. So on the 80th anniversary of what the worst day in the history of modern Russian history, it's an appeal, again, kind of surprises me, because there's just, what is it, the Russian term? He's unhandshakable. He doesn't want to be able to reach out the hand. The hand is being reached out, and it was back. It was what, 2007, the Munich conference speech.
Yeah.
And Putin said, that was the warning. That's the warning. And this one, like I started out, for me, this is kind of like last call, because at a certain, we're at a point now where it will be very difficult for us to reverse, and we don't see the hostility abating whatsoever. I am not the type of person to go, complaining about Joe Biden's mental acuity, but no one can. You can't wait to see if he's okay or not okay. And it was a kind of a bust of a summit, which maybe wasn't a bad thing. We've talked about this before. But Russia has to make important decisions, and it's been waiting for a long time. And if the hand isn't going to be stretched out, unclenched fist, there's.
Well, that's it. But
that's just the way it goes.
That's right. But that's the thing. I mean, we have these European leaders that make sensible noises, but then they don't follow through. So we've had Macron, who has also made sensible noises. Yeah, we need to have good relations with Russia. We need, ostracizing Russia is a really bad idea. German businessmen all want to see the great investment opportunities in Russia, but they never quite materializes. And I think that is because of the poisonous influence of NATO. I mean, NATO just simply overwhelms everything. And I think that's the point that he's making. I think that logically, Europe and Russia should have good relations. But NATO is just simply destroys any real possibility of this happening.
Well, look, a hypothetical. Let's say Russia makes, across the board unilateral concessions. Do you think the eating comes with the appetite, George? Right. What next? Right. Well, you're too big, so you need to break yourself up, okay? And then the new, and we've seen it, Africa, the final frontier. China, the final frontier. I've said it before, and I want to be very emphatic here. This is a way for Washington and elites, London elites, Brussels elites, is to completely go around international law, completely go around the United Nations, and they always talk about the democracies and all of that. Well, your biggest best friends to the democratic world are some of the most autocratic, odious people on the planet. Okay, you never want to point it out. Okay, right. And so this is it here. I mean, this is a bid to remake the international system, and what's interesting about it is that so the new international system will be only a select few that can participate. Then everybody's else outside. Okay.
Right. So, but I think it's also
there's no universal international law.
Right. No, but I think it's also interesting that this platform was provided for Putin by Die Zeit. Now, Die Zeit is a kind of a liberal in German terms newspaper, not necessarily especially well disposed towards Putin, but I think it's an interesting glimpse into maybe German elite thinking. They've seen what the last 10 years have wrought, and they're saying that it's not actually delivering anything for Germany. I mean, what is the point of this constant wave of new sanctions and this constant aggravation of endlessly chemical weapons here, Navalny there, what about cyber attack here, election interference there?
And what do they get for
it? So where's this leading?
Yeah, but what do they sanctions? And the result? Hello.
Yeah.
You would think that this this is not working. This is not working.
Right.
And they double down, triple down on it as if it's going to make, I mean, is it a form of you know, not the businessmen. I was in St. Petersburg a few weeks ago at the International Economic Forum. They are begging for better relations. This is a huge market for them.
Yep.
Huge market.
That's right.
And it's not their government that the German businessmen, they're not afraid of the German government, they're afraid of the US Treasury.
Right. Yeah.
It's not even a European institution.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's why it's the bizarreness of this is, you know, the United States punishes companies that have nothing to do with the United States. I mean, it's like, and they're conducting business that has nothing to do with the United States. I mean, a gas pipeline between Germany and Russia has nothing to do with you. I mean, it's like, but the United States, you know, steps in and starts punishing companies that are involved. And again, punishing companies, private companies. They're not even punishing governments. They're punishing private companies. So
again, to say it for the 1,000,000th time, the narrative is Russia somehow hoodwinked, threatened, tricked, blackmailed the Germans into the Nord Stream 1 and 2. No, everyone, the Germans asked for it. And the Russians said, okay. I mean, it's got to be a consortium. We don't want to be left holding the bag here. Okay.
Well, I mean,
if you want it, you got to participate too.
So that's I think, but it is interesting, you know. But Putin goes back and said, "Yeah, we started all this in 1970, more than 50 years ago. We've been involved in these natural gas business deals with Germany." So I mean, the idea that this all happened yesterday, and my God, what a horrific ordeal. No, I mean, this has been a long-standing and something that makes sense because, you know, Russia has the natural resources. Germany has the business know-how.
And you have to think about this. I mean, you and I think about it logically, and I get really frustrated talking about it. But I would ask people that claim that this is something that is detrimental, is that for a second, think counterintuitively. If once this pipeline, and it will be up, the gas will be flowing, the bills will be paid, why would either side want to play around with that?
Right.
Why? Because they've made it part of their security. Russia is reaching out the hand. We want different forms of business and economic integration. This is a really good example.
Right.
Okay. I mean, do you think the Russians could, you know, they're put in a position, oh, the Germans won't pay now. Okay. So it screws the Russians. Well, no, I mean, under what possible conditions could that happen? Okay?
It can't. I mean,
they've been doing it since the 70s, everyone. And that was even before the evil empire was invented in Reagan's mind.
That's right. And that's the whole point of the Soviet Union, even in those days, was always a very reliable business partner for an obvious reason. If you're an unreliable business partner, then no one's going to do any business with you. So that's why.
So George, explain to me. So if Russia's an unreliable energy partner, why did the Germans propose it?
That's the thing. I mean, it's that's why it's so ludicrous. The whole idea that Russia would turn off the gas. I mean, it wouldn't do any. I mean, Germany would still have gas. I mean, Europe would still have gas. It's not like, oh my God, Europe now has no gas. They will still have
a Rachel Maddow moment.
Exactly. I mean, you know, it'll only be taking about 40% of German natural gas needs. So it will still have gas, but it will lose its status as a reliable business partner. And that's something that Russians don't want to lose. So it's always so nonsensical, the idea that they would turn off the tap in order to blackmail Europe for some reason or other. I mean, so the whole theory was completely absurd. But yeah, go on.
And when the taps were turned off that time, is because of Ukraine. Ukraine wouldn't pay its bills, right. And so it was put into an impossible. Russia was put into an impossible position. Is it so? We're going to ship our natural gas for free? Right. There were Western pundits saying that, George. Oh, they ought to just give it to us. Okay. Hey, what's our natural gas doing in Russia? That mentality.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Oh,
the thing is that I think what I take away from, which I think is important, and it's a really important point to discuss, is this the last real appeal, last hope for rapprochement? Because the horses left the stable, folks.
Mhm.
And getting the horse back in the stable is going to be, it gets harder with every passing day. So I hope this gets circulated. And, you know, I don't know what level of education Jake Sullivan has. I'm sure it's very high, but I mean, it doesn't mean he's intelligent. Okay.
Right.
You know, I hope they read it and just say, you know, this may be the final curtain call. I don't know. I think it is.
All right. We will, of course, maintain our laser-like focus on Russia and Putin.
And my little dog Chihuahua buddy, he's on it's very hot here, so he's sleeping on the stone floor to keep cool. I'm not going to disturb his rest here. He doesn't like that. But he does like tips in his tip jar at thegaggle.locals.com.
That's right.
And I keep an eye on the tip jar. I know George is spying it all the time.
I'm helping myself. You know, I'm sick of Buddy helping himself. So we're also on Rumble. Look us up there. And remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.